And welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship captain with a Franco-British accent once said, and as another famous starship captain once said, wherever our mission takes us, we'll be sure to have a little fun along the way.
Hello, everyone. I am psychologist Dr. Mattu.
And I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. And one of us is a real doctor.
And we'll leave it up to you to decide who that is. In this week's episode, we're talking about false assumptions, something I think we're all dealing with a lot this week. So let us know in the comments, what's your favorite episode of Star Trek that has dealt with assumptions about other people, about situations, about species. Let us know in the comments, what's your favorite episode. Larry, if this is
people's... Just about all of them? Ollie?
I mean, it could be. Star Trek really does a good job of this. What is Life Support Live for those of us who might be here? Well, not you and me, but for everyone else who might be here for the first time.
I don't know. What is it for you? Let's get a little existential here. No, hey, I look at everybody. Welcome. I love seeing everybody here. I've still got to get used to my mobile chat room here, but it's glad to see everybody. I know a lot of our names are back and everybody's here. And if you're new this week, welcome. But yes, any of the old timers. Hey, this is week 20, by the way. This is our 20th episode. So any of the real veterans here will tell you that we are truly going boldly where in uncertain times, the way 2020 has evolved. Now we're looking at Star Trek through a mental health lens, or we're looking at mental health through a Star Trek lens. You take your pick. But we have plenty to geek out about, but also hopefully shed a little awareness and maybe send you off with something helpful for your day.
Yeah. You are more than welcome to join the conversation in the comments. Or if you like, you can also join us. There's our Skype link. If you send us a message on Skype, we might be able to pull you in at the end of the show. We go through our segments. We have our briefing room, which we're about to dive into. And then we have the counselor's log, where I do a deeper dive into the psychology behind what we're talking about. We then get over to our... Larry, help me out here. I'm blanking. No, before the OA team is the
K3.
The K3 factor. A deeper dive.
Well, I know who's been paying attention and who hasn't.
And then we have our away mission, where we leave you with some way to apply this to your life right now, and then we open up the hailing frequencies and just have an open, fun chat for the rest of our time.
Although don't be chat right now. Hailing frequencies we'll turn it on full blast, but
full blast. Yeah, it's more of a knob. How much are the frequencies open?
I take it to 11. I don't know about you, but in 24th century terms, I don't know, but I take it to 11 here.
So let's open up that the briefing room. Let's walk into the briefing room. Let's jump into it. So what we've been doing on Life Support Live for the last few weeks is we take this week's episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, and we use that as inspiration, as a jumping off point to talk about our topic. Now we're not going to go into spoilers at all into this week's episode of Lower Decks. So if you're not watching it, don't want to watch it, can't watch it, that's fine. You're totally fine. You're not going to miss out on anything. We're not going to spoil anything. But we are just going to use it as a jumping off point and to kind of start talking about it. So this week's episode was it named Moist Vessel? Is that right?
Yeah, right? I think there's some kind of wacky marketing going on with these titles. But okay, yes.
Yeah, so there's really two stories that relate to what we're talking about here. There was a story between these two officers, which we know have some deeper relationship with each other, and they were trying to survive. Our captain and our lower decker were trying to survive together in a difficult situation, and they both had very strong assumptions of each other, what their strengths are, what their motivations are, what their weaknesses are. But then we also... Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then we also have these two characters who had some pretty strong assumptions of each other. And
For
this
sure.
seemed like it was a good topic for us to talk about, Larry, because, well, there's a lot of reasons to have to be struggling with having assumptions of other people right now. But just would love your thoughts on this story, this episode, and kind of get us started.
Well, yeah, in a non-spoilery way, guys. And I say that because a lot of our audience, if you're new to life support, we're global, baby. We're global, and a lot of the globe is not legally getting short treks. Yes, that's true. That too. No, they're not legally getting lower decks. And if a two-word title rhymes in X, then I guess apparently the world is not supposed to see it. Um, but just in a non-spoilery way, yeah, they've pretty much stuck to an A story and a B story structure. So Michael Pillar is going to be real proud. But it's a half hour or 22 minutes technically. And this week I've enjoyed all the short treks, but this one didn't seem to as grab me as much as the last couple, just as an audience person,
Yeah.
without getting into too much of the plot. But there were lots of moments that were fun, and there were definite arcs and character bits. Like I said, people worry about short treks. What's with me today? People worry about lower decks being Star Trekky enough. My concern with it is the times when it has to be sitcom-y. And
Yeah.
I felt like a couple of those moments this week, just because the format's so condensed. But both of our plots we're talking about, and our theme today, which I mean, on one hand, well, that's the classic drama, and even that's the classic sitcom. Oh, if only Lucy had picked up the phone, none of this story would have happened. Kind of a thing. It's not quite that bad, but still, as I said, one of our sets of characters here have a long-term relationship, so it's interesting to see how this is still playing out. The other two characters, one is a regular, one is one. I love how they're gradually, just like the best of Real Trek, giving a name to all the background characters. So wavy-headed guy is now O'Connor. Oops, spoiler. But we've got a pairing up there that we saw, who are not, regular and somebody we just barely knew. And it's the one that feels a little bit sitcom-y, both coming and going, but then it's the one that winds up being science fiction-y, more so than the other. So that was
Yeah.
kind of my first blush. I still enjoyed it. I didn't get up and leave the room or anything watching. It
Yeah.
just doesn't so much a grabber.
I like the character moments between some of our lead characters here, and I like the development that happened there. Um, for me, I was a little bit more interested in the larger science fiction that was happening outside of the ship um,
Oh
than
yeah.
I
So
was the B storyline. Um, because at the very beginning of the episode, it does introduce this idea that I was really interested in, but then doesn't really explore that. So I thought it was just okay. It was an okay episode. It took our characters into some good directions, but it also just didn't grab me as much. There were some funny moments though in it that I enjoyed. So, but it did have this. Oh, go ahead, Larry. You were about to say
the
something.
big thing. I'm behind on the chatter. People are probably screaming about it. We did apparently, since they didn't say by name, but we apparently finally had a Tellarite character.
Yes, we did. We did. Not just any Tellarite character, but someone who is high up on the food chain.
Yeah, with a bizarrely American Western name. So I was like, really? And somebody, maybe one of our listeners, was in just daily Twitter. Okay, so his character name is Captain Durango, and
Durango,
and my
yeah.
first blush was Durango. And so I forget, if you're in the chat today, I apologize, but someone in Twitter said, no, it's Captain Durango or something.
So, yeah, Scott says, I actually feel this episode was my favorite so far. So, Scott, if you could let us know in a non-spoiler way what you loved about this episode, let us know. We're getting some great comments and are starting to come in about people's favorite episodes that gets to false assumptions. It might have been might have been, yeah, Scott also was the first to comment about an episode.
Right.
Devil in the Dark is the first that comes to mind.
Oh,
Of
that.
course. Um, of course. How can how can you not you can't go wrong with Devil in the Dark. But then also we got another comment here regarding Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Yeah, Cairo 47 says, I wonder how much In the Pale Moonlight is really false assumptions. And this is something that, yeah, we could really go in a lot of different directions.
Every episode. Really.
Every episode, right. Yeah, Worf realizes that Romulans can be honorable. In example, the Romulans fought with honor. That was a great thread we discussed in a previous episode. Also, TNG, the enemy, the Romulan, assumes that humans are weak because they allow Geordi to live, despite his blindness. So, Larry, yeah, we could talk about like every episode of Star Trek. What you and I also had some false assumptions with each other as we were sort of planning out this topic. What was it about false assumptions that really resonated with you with that idea?
Well, yeah. Well, I have to say, I think part of the reveal about this episode, maybe not, still enjoyable, but maybe not as strong as some of the other ones, is because we were kind of fumbling around. It's a new word. Fumbling around trying to figure out what our focus point was. We did a poll. Thanks everybody, by the way. If you're not a member of our Facebook page for Life Support Live, please go over. So thanks to everybody who jumped in on this week's poll-ish, which was a playoff between the two ideas we came up with, because I wasn't. Yeah. We had to feel our way to this. We actually felt our way to two titles of themes, and then wound up with this one. Which I think is the stronger one also. I agree with the majority of our voters. But, and then I said, well, couldn't this really be, I mean, I've been kidding about it here, but truly, couldn't it be everything? Because you've got drama, even though it's so heightened in the serialized shows, but like, reveals, sometimes something information or an identity is completely hidden, but sometimes it's a switch. It's, it's being presented as one thing, and you're assuming something, and then you're found out to be wrong, and that's where some of the conflict and the drama comes from. But I got into the point where my first thought was false assumptions, where it's on you that your assumptions are wrong. Almost like it's what do I call it, passive assumptions. And then sometimes when the other person is faking you out intentionally, I don't know, like dramatically has an agenda and they don't tell you everything. That it's like active assumption, or maybe I'm backwards. But anyway, it's like depending on the viewer or the character involved, is it their fault, or were they a deer in the headlights? And then we finally just said, well, make it all.
Yeah, and there's a lot of directions to go with this.
And I guess that reflects our life today anyway. So okay.
Yeah, right. I think where it's impacting, or the reason why I wanted to talk about it this week is it's quite easy to walk around right now and have strong assumptions about other people related to whether or not they're wearing a mask, related to political beliefs, related to all of these different things. So it seemed like this might be a great time when, especially here in the United States, we've had two political conventions, one this week, one the other week. Things feel very heightened and intense. And it just...
Like a 22-minute animated sitcom.
Right. But it doesn't end. But it just keeps going. So it seemed like a good time to tackle this. Before we get into some of the rest of the canon, to kind of tie up Lower Decks, Scott got back to us and said, I enjoyed both the character of the A-plot and the sci-fi B-plot. The pacing down a bit and the characters are beginning to feel more organic. I definitely agree with that. Again, lots of fun details, and the comedy was Trek referential. It was, and really funny. Yeah, those are all good points. Victoria's mentioning statistical probabilities as an episode that really deals with false assumptions. We're getting a lot of... Larry, this is always a thing. Deep Space Nine.
Hi, Victoria. If you're new, hello. Maybe not, but okay.
Linda saying Jake not joining Starfleet. And I think Libby might have mentioned Nog earlier. So Deep Space Nine will always win. Whenever we ask for examples, I feel like whatever it is, Deep Space Nine always wins. Clayton says Daggers of the Mind, where the away team assumes that the criminally insane are being treated well, since they believe that humans have become better, more evolved, and more humane. When they find out the truth, that's the first episode that really upset me. Wow. Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, I definitely can understand that. Oh, and Linda says, I basically watched the animated series after Lower Decks, and Spock says, Sensors.
Oh, yes. Yes, Spock does say sensors indicate. I mean, Doomsday Machine is one of my favorite original series episodes, or all time. And Spock definitely says sensors reading nothing over theirs. I mean, yes, that whole thing was a joke on a Star Trekky thing that was in Lower Decks this week. But I didn't get the meanness, because one of the most revered people in Starfleet history, who doesn't need a statue in the future, said sensors all the time. Yeah, sensors are not malfunctioning, sir. Sensors are
Victorious says that they are new, so welcome, Victoria.
Yeah.
Good to have you here. So, Larry, we got a lot of episodes to jump through, and something we like to do is we do like to go around in the canon. We like to explore different examples of this, because we all are fans of different aspects of Star Trek. And one of the ones I wanted to talk about first, Larry, is an episode that surprisingly you and I have not yet discussed. And it's a fan favorite, and that would be The Next Generation's All Good Things. When we're talking about false assumptions, there's a lot, I think, that's at play here with do they refer to him as Admiral Picard or Captain
No,
Picard?
it's Captain.
Or
Well,
Ambassador.
I now I've got to watch it, right? Because you've
Yeah.
got Admiral Riker for sure.
Yeah.
But
Now I'm totally blanking. Maybe the chat can. I think some people say Captain. Do some people say Admiral? I don't know. Anyways, not the point of why I'm bringing it up. But we see a lot of assumptions at play, especially in the future. It's really interesting to see future Picard versus past Picard. The Picard of the maiden voyage of the Enterprise D, when they're supposed to encounter Q. I love that. In the future, the assumption is that because of Picard's age, as well as his syndrome, what's it called again, Larry? The
Pinar? No. No, it was just part of Picard that no one mentioned. Someone will say it.
I want to say, I don't know. I was about to say neuromancer syndrome, but no, that's not it. That would be a book. It's not that. Anyways, it's a form of dementia. So people are saying
syndrome? No, that's
another episode.
That's
someone will let us know. Someone's gonna let us know very soon. But there's an assumption that he's older. He's experiencing dementia. He has this illness, and so he wants to go on this wild goose chase, as we say in the United States. But if you compare that versus the present day Picard and the past Picard, the crew isn't making those assumptions at all. And in the past Picard, the maiden voyage Enterprise D, you would think that someone would really raise, or more people would raise red flags. They finally do, where I think Counselor Troy can you tell us anything? And maybe even Tasha Yar asked, like,
I remember specifically, right.
Yeah, like, can you give us any idea why you're asking us to do this? And Picard says, no, and he kind of gives him this great speech. You are the finest crew in the fleet. Does that count as an impression? Maybe. And they follow through. But there's an assumption that this older man doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And so I think that's a great example. It isn't until Data later on goes, oh, well, this might be true because of the anti-time eruption and all this sort of stuff. So then
Tech the tech, and everyone's
oh yeah,
right after all.
yeah. My favorite is when Jordy goes, yeah, Data. Jordy has that moment in like every episode where Data says something and Jordy's like, yeah, Data. And if we do this, this, and this, then that. And Data goes, oh yes, in theory that is possible. That's like
It's
every.
It's like a pile of whipped cream on an uneaten watermelon pie. I don't know. It's like
Right.
it's the Star Trek metaphor. Hey, a shout out here real quick to oh no, who was it? Was it? I want to say it was. Oh, was it here? Aromatic syndrome.
Yes. Thank you.
Not
Thank you,
aromatic
Zia.
syndrome. That's aro that comes on by itself.
Yeah.
Aromatic syndrome.
And I'm glad I'm not the only one. Linda also mentioned neuromotic syndrome. So, Linda, you and I were having a mind meld with the neuromancer, neuro something. We knew it had to deal with neurons. We
Yeah.
did know that. So,
Obviously. Yep.
so yeah, there's some ageism there, I think, at play, Larry, where we might not. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, actually, when we came up with this false assumptions, I kind of said, well, because we've touched on this in some of our prior episodes. That basically it appears to me that false assumptions is a harmless way. Well, not necessarily harmless, but a first stage description of a spectrum that leads to, like, false assumptions leads to biases, that leads to prejudice, that leads to, say, racism, misogyny, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like it's the first stage. It's the one that's maybe harmless-ish, although plenty of bad can come out of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to trust issues or who you're going to believe, who you're going to follow, if your life's on the line, or I don't know, your country's life is on the line. But yeah, and we've been on that spectrum in more severe terms already.
Yeah.
But just to point that out, it's not
Yeah.
always just a harmless, oh, gee, what should I wear, the blue shirt or the red shirt today? It's not.
Speaking of which, Jared mentioned we are coordinating for 2 weeks in a row. We're both in Life Support Blue, and I have my science badge on today, Larry. I've shifted away from command for the week.
You're into a blue shift. Yes.
I'm into a blue shift. This is my blue phase.
Which has nothing to do with Delta shift. I'm talking about
No.
blue.
Oh, those Delta shifters, they think they're so great.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Cairo mentions that on Beverly's ship, someone says Captain Picard, and they both react. And I think that both helps to answer our question, how did people refer to Jean-Luc Picard? But it also gets an assumption too, Larry, right? Like Captain Picard believing that, like, if he hears that like they're obviously referring to him. It's a very subtle one, and it makes sense why.
Some of that's just human nature and what you're used to hearing.
Yeah.
I guess because I mean, the danger here on this, and the reason I was kind of like, traipsing in warily, is that, like, everything can be an assumption. I mean, our whole day is filled with assumptions and false assumptions if we're not on our toes.
Yeah, which I'm definitely I want to dive into that in the council.
This is all going to be on you. No.
All right, so I had an episode I dived into. Larry, what episode do you want to dive into next?
What did we say? Where's the list? What's a picture I sent you?
Do you want to go to DS9?
Oh yeah, yes. Well, that was actually your idea, but sure. Oh no, the other DS9. Right.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about is this episode right over here, where Kira meets. Thanks to the orb, is it the orb of time that allows her?
It might be. It's some timey-wimey thing. Yeah. I think,
it's one of those orbs.
The orb of time is classically DS9's "we don't care about technobabble" answer.
So, because of this orb, she meets her mother and discovers that her mother, when she was taken away from her family, from Kira and
as a little girl,
that she was taken to Terok Nor, and through events that that were orchestrated, was Gul Dukat sort of befriended her, and we find out later that he did this with a lot of of women that were taken prisoner.
Well, Bajoran women, right?
Bajoran women,
Is the
yeah.
yeah, it's the oppressive occupier. Well, she was a comfort woman, basically.
A comfort woman, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Kira is like repelled, and she assumed that her mom went off and was like a martyr. Then she finds out that, oh my God, she succumbed. He broke her. Oh, ew, ick, ew, ah. And then she actually lives the real story, and comes to it. Yeah, but she firstly falsely assumes the worst of her own mother.
Yeah, she does. She does, and it's a very tough episode to watch for a number of reasons. And fun fact, I guess I get to play a little K3 factor myself. The original intention of that episode was it's revealed that Kira is in love with Gul Dukat, and Nana Visitor said, no, we're not doing that. This is not, I draw the line. You are not going to have that storyline. And the writers went back and kind of, this is what came out of it, which I think is a stronger episode, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
plot point from the DS9 documentary, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wrongs
darker than Death or Night, everybody.
I love the K3 factor that you added to my K3 factor right there, Larry. That's awesome. Okay. Well, like where that was revealed from.
oh, okay. Tiny, like a K half.
K half. But I mean, I saw this episode, and it made me think of the assumptions we have of our family, particularly our parents. Now that I'm a parent, I think about this a lot, about how my daughter really only knows about the life that she's been exposed to, but she's never seen the full life I had before she was ever born. And she'll only know what I share with her. And I will have my own biases of how I present myself. But we often don't really understand our parents' stories and who they were. And we come into these situations with all these assumptions of what they were like based upon what we know now. And there's often a big gap there between who they were and who they are right now, and the stories that we've been told, or the stories we've told ourselves.
And that's often fodder for dramas and sitcoms alike, when the child sees the parent in a new light, and vice versa. Oh, including this episode this week of Lower Deck. A story, I want to say, yeah. The same thing. So another DS9 though episode to get away from parents.
Yeah.
But a wonderful play on the texture. And we've mentioned this before. And I believe it's a B story to its episode, but it's the moment when Nog comes in to apply for the academy, and he needs a letter from Cisco, a pad letter from Cisco, and Cisco, which is a wonderful moment of the timing and Aryan character. Cisco and Avery Brooks, who's always on the lookout for how African Americans, how blacks are portrayed in modern TV vis-a-vis a 24th century show about humans set in the future, where everybody's wonderfully, happily not, equal, and they're not prejudiced in the Federation anyway. How that's flipped to where he prejudges.
Yeah.
He has his biases and his prejudices, his cultural bias about Ferengi, and suspects Nog is up to something. He's got a plot. I sent you a picture if you want to throw it in there, but
I don't think I have that picture downloaded for some reason.
Oh, okay. Well, it's fine. It's all very vivid, and it's one of, people talk about Aaron Eisenberg's late great Aaron's, some of his best scenes. That was like one or two or three of the pivotal moments for Nog, is when he gets up and defends himself, because Cisco just can't understand what's the he finally gets in his face. I was watching it again last night. What gets in his face? What's the profit in it for you, Ferengi, to be in Starfleet? And he gets, and Nog draws himself up to his full, 1 meter point 3 or whatever, and says, "No, my dad was trying to be a good Ferengi, and he does not have the lobes for business. He's a mechanical engineer, but he tried to be a good Ferengi, and look what it got him. He's
Yeah.
hoping his brother dies so he can get his bar." He says,
Yeah.
"And I don't want to wind up like that, and I want to make something of myself, so I don't wind up like him." And he's so emotional about it that Cisco is blown away and says, "Yes, I'll do it on the spot."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it's
but that's one of the huge assumption reversal moments in all of Star Trek. I mean, some of them are like an hour-long plot, like Devil in the Dark, or like any number of, the reveals that bring the surprise of the moment, whatever. But that's one of those moments where it happens in 5 minutes.
I'm really glad you mentioned that one, Larry, because it's something we've mentioned here and there on previous episodes of Life Support Live, and I think there's a reason why it keeps coming up, because it is such a powerful reversal, and unlike most of the other episodes we're talking about, the consequences of it play out over the course of the entire series. And we see Nog develop as a result of Cisco being open to a different perspective than he walked into, and as a result of Nog really sharing his story and advocating for himself in a way that Ben Sisko really understood. We see what happens as a result. This person is given a chance to enroll in Starfleet, to become an officer, to make a big difference in the course of events for Deep Space Nine. So I love that moment, and it's so beautifully acted between those two actors. It's a wonderful moment, and it's a moment where they both are doing some things that I'll talk about in our away mission a little bit later. I love that moment, and I think it's a big it's a fan favorite among our lifers here in our community. It's wonderful.
Well,
There's one we skipped from TNG, Larry. If you wanna, do you want to dive into this one?
Oh, this was on your list too. You knew what you were talking about. No, this is from the Masterpiece Society. It's the human, the genetically engineered or the genetic whatever human perfect colony who's got an asteroid or bearing down on their planet, and they need some help. But they're so big on their genetic engineering mindset. Everybody there and their offspring are highly evolved. And here comes Geordi in to help save the day, and he's blind. And Hannah Bates, I'll always remember this character's name, but she's reflecting her culture, her little wacky colony culture. They're humans, a few hundred years removed.
Their eugenic culture.
Yes. Moab 4, which I always thought was an interesting use of a place name from Utah. But anyway, she, her big reveal is that she goes into this thinking, well, how great can he be if he's blind? What, really? You're insulting us by, okay, fine. You're sending us this guy, and then she's won over, of course, because it's Geordi. And plus he doesn't have like a weird, creepy holodeck version of her to date. So that helped also. But but no, so in the end, yeah, she does her, and she's just a guest star, not a regular, so it's not as powerful. But in the moment, and then she has a little bit of momentary friction with some of the rest of her group there too. But basically, she's seen the truth and she gets it. But her cultural bias is against people, who are disabled.
Yeah, who might have any aspect of that falls below their level of perfection, and a big assumption that they have is that these people can't contribute to our society, and they would be so unhappy living with whatever challenge that they might have, which Geordi many times in that episode. He really does a good job of respecting their culture while
Respect her
also he's tolerating while also trying to advocate for
Right.
himself and share his story. And that's something that I think keeps coming back. Like in that moment with Nog shares his story
Yes.
with
Cisco.
Cisco, and it defies the assumptions that Cisco has. Similarly, here Jordy tells his
And the
story,
audience.
and the audience,
I
totally,
mean, the
absolutely,
audience, they're also,
yeah, yeah,
pretty much for Cisco. It's not like it's a lone wolf. Can I
absolutely.
just say on Masterpiece Society, part of what's going,
Please,
not what's happening with, say, Cisco and Nog, but in Masterpiece Society, what, again, the heightening of drama is that she and her culture have this, cultural bias against the disabled, but he saves their ass.
yes,
It's like,
yes.
it's a life and death situation. So,
Not
when
only
we,
does he save them, but the technology that exists that allows him to see, which would have never been created on this planet, is what saves this planet.
yes. How ironic. Hmm.
Yeah.
They should do a story on that someday.
We should.
But yeah, the point here being that you have assumptions, you put people in boxes, or you put entire groups in boxes, occasionally at your peril.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, not just an intellectual exercise or a thing in social justice or whatever. It could be, a life and death
Yeah,
situation.
we win when we have diverse perspectives and when we help everyone in the community. That's when teams are the strongest. When you
When we
have lots
celebrate
of different.
diversity, it don't. Yeah.
Yes, and infinite combinations. I also want to mention Scott here. He says, speaking of Geordie and creepy holodeck versions, his assumption that the real Leah Brahms was going to be single and share his feelings of chemistry and romance, absolutely. And that's not what we see happen. In fact, it gets really awkward when Leah Brahms sees the holodeck version of herself from
Oops.
Utopia Planitia. Whoops, that was really uncomfortable. Hey, and just a quick welcome. I think we've got Tadami from Twitch. Hello,
Hey.
good to have you here. And Nathaniel, welcome to the chat over on YouTube as well. So, yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes, Larry. I really love where they go with that episode. But we can move even more forward in time. Where do you want to jump into next?
Well, this is so funny. We had a Voyager episode, I think, at least one pulled up.
Yeah.
You want to help me out? No,
Yeah.
I
Species 8472. We wanted to talk
I
about.
have to say we went through so many ideas, and I did this kind of late last night. But yes,
Yeah.
this was an interesting one, and this is a good science fiction use of this. But it was 8472 looking kind of the same way, looking at humans, vice versa, through reverse point of view, the alien point of view on humans.
So to remind everyone,
In
species
the
eight four
flesh.
seven two, they are the species that are seen as more powerful than the Borg. In I think it's Scorpion Part 1, the cold open has a few different Borg cubes ships, and species 8472 kind of appears and just destroys all of them
Fluid
like that.
space. It's a different, yeah.
Fluidic space, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Different from subspace, different from, I don't know, other
Gaseous space.
Yeah,
Different
yeah, yeah.
from
It's
space.
fluidic space. It's very
Fluidic.
wet over there in fluidic space. But yeah, our assumption about 8472 is they are violent, aggressive. They will tear our region of space apart if they're allowed to. That's what we walk into with this episode. And then what happens, Larry?
They're, for lack of a better word, humanized. No, they, it's to be able to masquerade as humans. They were doing a human training exercise where they completely spoiler alert, they completely duplicated a small environment that resembled the whole Starfleet complex of Earth in
Yeah.
San Francisco. And of course, the surprise reveal in the teaser is that you think you're back on Earth, and it turns out no, these are all aliens who are maintaining a human form or whatever
Yeah.
Federation humanoid form, and it's a perfect replica of the Tillman sewage plant. Oh no, look, it's Starfleet Academy and Starfleet headquarters, yada yada yada, the Quantum Cafe.
The Quantum Cafe.
Or Voyager.
You're not
Every
a
time I
fan.
tried to be cool on Voyager, it just came out clunky. But, oh, did I say that? Okay. Uh, and Chakotay's trapped there. They're going back and forth. They're trying to see if it's an invasion attempt, and
Yeah.
8472 is trying to get to understand humans more by copying them. And yeah, but part of my takeaway was the assumptions that 8472 species, or the Undine, if you're an STO player, um, it was also reverse about the assumptions they had about humans too. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and the assumptions we have about Boothby, who, how many series has Boothby appeared in? He was in TNG.
just
Did Booth
TNG and Voyager. Yeah.
TNG, no DS9 appearance?
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Such a memorable character for someone who just because he was. Don't they allude to him early on in TNG before we actually see him? Because we see him in the first duty, I think, where Picard
Mm-hmm.
sees Boothby again. But they talk about him before, about like the great Boothby.
Well, Picard tells a story, a captain's story, and it was one of those things that, and Ron Moore used it in the first duty. It was a thing of, well, we mentioned this guy. Why don't we drop him in and use it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was one of the first great time. Well, not the first, but another great moment of pulling a mention out. And it's what today we'd call that. Oh, it's an Easter egg, and I'm saying no, it's called using the universe.
Well, I also want to talk about Enterprise here, and one of my favorite storylines actually from Enterprise comes from I believe the episode is called Stigma,
Yes.
and it's an episode where we have known Vulcans for many years as a
Well,
viewer,
we
as a
thought
fan of.
it
Well, we thought we knew them exactly. We have certain ideas from Spock and from Sarek and from Tuvok as well. And then by the time we get to Enterprise and we see these Vulcans are quite different, but we also begin to understand that the mind meld, this core part of what we know about Vulcan culture and Vulcan abilities, their touch telepathy, that this is actually a highly stigmatized.
taboo.
It's a very taboo practice that's seen to be only done by this fringe few strange people, and that there's also a disease that can be transmitted through mind meld, which is seen to be only affecting these undesirable population. And that when I
Sounds like
saw
a
that, Larry,
metaphor to me.
right, right, I wonder what they're talking about. In this is a world before I think PrEP, the main drug that reduces transmission of HIV, which has made HIV something that's more of a chronic condition that people can live with, as opposed to this deadly, yeah, as opposed to this deadly illness. I don't think it was really around by the when this episode was there, but this episode was clearly. Had something to say about HIV/AIDS. It clearly had something to say about the LGBTQ plus population, and it challenged our assumptions of Vulcans, and it challenged our assumptions of what it means to mind meld. I really liked that episode
Mm-hmm.
for that reason, that it helped us to understand, well, like Vulcans, this core part of what is a part of their culture, they went through a journey with this, and they had to work through their own stuff. And T'Pol is actually pretty instrumental in bringing about some of that change.
Yeah, that's the value of a people. I don't want to see a prequel show because Star Trek's about going into the future. And I always say, well, gosh, 2151 still seems like the future to me. But it shows the strength of a prequel show is that, yeah, you can come in and have a completely new layer that fits, but it gives you so much under, just because you saw this moment, you saw Spock in the 2360s and onward. Oh, that's Vulcans. That's that. And there are already points that give you cause to pause. Like
Yeah.
they'd known them for 200 years. They'd been co-founders of a government for 100 years, and no
Yeah.
one knew about Pon farr outside Vulcan. You know, there's so many little bits about Vulcans that go, now wait a minute, guys. You came
Right.
up with one Starfleet doctor that knows about Pon farr. What?
Yeah.
I'm sure he wrote a paper. I love how the meme, even on lower decks, has become Starfleet doctors writing papers. Uh, but but I mean, the door is open there. So all the controversy about Berman being Sarek's foster daughter that we never heard of. Well, given the whole Pon farr mystery, and given
Oh
Cybok
yeah.
pops up out of nowhere, it's like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
bets are off. The point is
For
that
a logical people, they're quite illogical at times.
but at least they didn't blow themselves up. So
Yeah.
no, I was totally, I was totally. It was great. It was more texture, and of course, but the biggest thing was, Berman and Braga are ruining the Vulcans by having them be so sneaky and all that. Well, you got, thank you, Manny Koto, for fixing the Vulcans, but at the same time giving all kinds of depth. They'd been astray even from Surak 1,000
Yeah.
years later, 800 years later,
Yeah.
eventually, not in this episode, but yeah, this episode Stigma is another. First, it's really kind of a part two of a two-part. First season, there was a
Yes.
show called Fusion where you saw the cult group, doing this thing called mind melding, and it was kind of surprising to she knew about it, but the humans didn't, and an
Yeah.
audience were going, what? They didn't
Yeah.
all mind meld from day one of on
Yeah.
Vulcan. They weren't all running around mind melding like crazy. So yeah, that was interesting. But then to turn it into this episode was actually part of a good old UPN had an AIDS awareness night, and
Mm.
this was Enterprise's entry offering
Oh,
for that.
I did not remember that.
Oh, now that's a mini K3 for you.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember what else was a part of that? Like, I can't even remember what else
Just look it
aired
up.
with
Whatever the other
Enterprise.
UPN shows were at the time.
Yeah, I can't.
That
I mean, I know there was wrestling. That's all I
it
remember.
was
And I
free
remember
wrestling.
the crossover with The Rock. The Rock's first acting appearance ever was Star Trek Voyager.
Yes, for Sunkatsu. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The person who is probably known now for saving franchises first appeared on Star Trek Voyager. Isn't that amazing?
Where that would have been a case of saving a network, not so much a franchise. Some things even The Rock can't do.
Well, speaking of fluidic space and all this stuff, can we jump timelines
To
here,
moist
Larry?
vessels. Oh no, what?
I wanna jump timelines a little bit, and I want to go into the Kelvin timeline actually, and I want to talk about Star Trek Beyond. Specifically, I want to talk about. You sent me the image, but gosh, looks like I didn't download it for some reason. I want to talk about Kroll's character a little bit because I think there's
Captain Edison.
Captain. Whoa! Spoilers for those of you who have not seen Star Trek Beyond. I think the statute of limitations has
It's
completely
4
worn off.
friggin' years now.
Yeah,
Come on.
has it been 4 years?
4,000 star dates. Come on. Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time to go without a Star Trek movie. Although we've been through longer stretches than
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what I think is really interesting about Kroll is, or Captain Edison, he was an individual who signed up for a version of Starfleet that was more similar to what we saw in Enterprise, a version of Starfleet where it's really pushing forward. There's a lot of threats all over the place. They haven't really formed. They don't have the kind of peace that we see with the 1701 crew. Um, and he struggled with these ideas of what the Federation means as times were changing.
He
He
signed up for
also
the Makos.
He's trying. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I love that. I love that connection. I actually really enjoy how much the Kelvin timelines films do connect to Star Trek Enterprise. I do
Well,
really enjoy that. Um,
go
we have a
beyond.
Porthos. We have a Porthos mention, Captain Archer mention, and now a Makos mention.
Well, okay, 1 and 3, or yes, Arabic
It,
numeral 1 and 3 in '09
yes,
and
yes,
beyond.
yes. Into Darkness doesn't really mention
Still worthless.
Enterprise.
No,
Yeah. Oh
still
man,
not
I
geekery.
can. I will defend Star Trek Into Darkness whenever we have that conversation. Um, but anyways, getting back to Star Trek Beyond, there's the reveal that he is actually Edison, which false assumptions there. But I think it's much more what he signed up for and what Starfleet became and his struggle dealing with that. I think that's the more interesting, meatier part of all of this, and struggling with these ideas of diversity, of the Federation, that we're actually stronger together. A lot of the conversations that happened with him and Kirk on that starbase. What is that starbase called again? Nova? No, it's not
No,
Nova.
no, 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 no. Yorktown. Yeah.
Yorktown. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The confrontation that happens between
You're asking
him
me all
and
these
Kirk
Kelvin
on
questions.
on Yorktown.
So
I really
specific
enjoyed that.
timelines? I don't know. Did it amount to any? Does it bear witness to? I mean, bear fruit to anything else? No, that's a good point you said there about. I had not thought of it in those terms.
Mm,
My respect for this movie went up a few notches just then. But as you spoke there about it was just Starfleet was not what he signed up for as he got
right.
into it. I could somehow hear him saying, I could hear Idris Elba saying, "It's not that I hate you, Starfleet. It's what I became because of you."
Right. Right. It's kind of reflecting some of the similar challenges that happened with Star Trek 6, Star Trek The Undiscovered Country. But it's also speaking to some of the challenges that we are seeing in the world right now between the rise of nationalism
Mm-hmm.
and
Attention.
cooperation, the tension between nationalism and cooperating in this global society, that we are also interdependent upon each other now, which is something the coronavirus has just really exemplified. And there's a tension there between working in a global way, and thinking more in a nationalistic way. And I think that's the conflict that we see there in Star Trek Beyond. So I really love that aspect of the film.
Yeah. I've been trying to keep up with the chat. Where are we? Do we need to? Have we
We got one
exhausted
more.
ourselves out? Okay.
We got one more,
I'm
which we
checking to
can
see if
talk
anybody's popped
about.
some. Yeah.
If we want to jump back into the prime timeline, we can talk about
Well,
Lorca.
you're jumping into the prime timeline just in time to jump into the mirror universe.
Right, right. Yeah,
Come
right.
on, come on. Get your boxes and labels lined up here. Come on.
This is true. This is true. Back to the prime timeline's mirror universe, which is actually a different universe. It's not the prime timeline.
Right.
So, right, right. But Burnham in this image is from the prime timeline, though she is in the mirror universe timeline, and encountering Lorca, who's from the mirror universe timeline, who everyone thought was in the prime timeline, in the
They
prime
assumed
timeline.
he was. Some people
They
did.
assumed. Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
us saw him. From day one, I went, well, he's either Section 31 or he's a mirror guy.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. No. Anything you want to talk about Lorca? We haven't talked about Lorca at all. Anything you want to dive into here in terms of
Well,
false
everybody
assumptions?
loves Jason Isaacs.
Yes.
It's funny how if you have a series that is not set in the mirror universe or the Terran Empire, excuse me, which is a totally retcon name from later. But if you're going to start a new show where people barely know the characters and then immediately plunge them into the universe that's set up to have fun contrasting those characters when it's like, hello, I'll see your Next Generation doing a Naked Now 2 shows in after the pilot, and I'll raise you doing a Mirror Universe version for 4 episodes, 12 episodes into your series when people barely know the characters. It's like, okay. But what's intriguing is that you find out, Lorca is a Terran. He's a Mirror Universe guy, but immediately, and his prime, doppelganger was supposedly killed at the Binary Stars or soon after on his ship, the Baran. Real quick, what's the Baran? What was the Baran in history?
Something from Enterprise?
No, the Baran was the name of the Soviet space shuttle that they made a mock-up
of. Yes! Yes.
And
wow.
There was a Starship Baran on Okutagrams during Next Gen somewhere. Of course, that would have been 100 years later.
Yeah.
Ship of Baran. But anyway,
I think there's also, speaking of Enterprise's connections, I think there's a USS Shran in that fleet at the Battle of the Binary Stars.
Yes. One of the few that's a whole topic. I'm waiting for the rest of the Federation to rise up and say, enough of this human centrism of the Federation. Yeah. It's like, my God, do we all have to bow down to... So you helped us get founded. So you help us humans, Sol 3, you're our only hope at the beginning. But really, 200 years later, everything has been named for... Is there a river on Earth that hasn't had a ship named for it yet? Is there a dead city on Earth that hasn't had a ship? Can we have some dead cities on Andor or Teller or Vulcan or, name it?
Yeah.
Fred?
Yeah.
Come on, can we please? Anyway. There's a lot of fan love about, no, Prime Lorca, he's not dead. He's out there somewhere. And of course, Jason Isaacs is, fanning it. Back to your original point. But Lorca was an awesome character, even though it was kind of obvious something was different about him, and not just that he had a eye sensitivity to light.
Yeah, there were a lot of hints that he was from the Mirror Universe. I think that the sensitivity to the light was one. When he looked in the mirror and his reflection was kind of like doing its own thing, there's a lot there. I honestly don't know if there's
Dr. Mengele horrors of all his things.
Yeah.
Porn. Where is he getting all this stuff that's not known yet? Yeah.
I honestly don't know if there's much I took away from Lorca. I honestly am struggling to find anything that I really got.
It was interesting that Prime Lorca and Admiral Cornwell had a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope we get to see Prime Lorca. I really would love to see that. Although that's probably not going to happen, knowing what we know about where Discovery goes. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe on Strange New Worlds. We could see Lorca again.
Well, okay, but he'd be like a young... Okay. No, I guess it would be contemporary. Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway.
I just want to point out,
Lieutenant?
David said, I just flipped on lower decks. The USS Merced, dear God, Modesto, Merced, they just passed right over Turlock.
Hello, Dave. If you're new to joining us, then hi.
And Zahir had a great response. David, one of the runabouts is called the Lodi.
Yes.
So there we go. A lot of California.
I'm waiting. Oh, that's great. Someday they have to. It's really funny. Have you noticed how? Spoiler. They're always in the shuttle Yosemite. It's like, wait a minute. Is that like the model that's painted that they don't want to? Wait, this is the animation. It's like they're always in the same shuttle, which I think itself is another like making fun of in the family meme for Star Trek. But no, I want them to be using the Lodi one week, and the engines go out, and I want one of the characters to say, "Oh Lord, stuck in the Lodi again."
That'd be good. That'd be good. I like that.
Clearwater fans out there? Okay. Anyway.
I like that. Larry, we could talk about this character, but honestly, I kind of don't want to. I don't really have much. I don't have much to say. Would you mind if we venture into the counselor's log?
We can do that. If anybody wants to bring up the whole assumption thing about Volk and Ash Tyler, before, during, and after, please do.
Yeah,
But let's
yeah.
move on.
Let's
Yeah.
move on. We got the counselor's log. This is where I do a deeper dive into some of the psychology behind what we're talking about. And Larry, I actually have.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I do make it. I try. I do my best. I have an activity, actually, a follow along for all of us to do. This is one of my favorite activities to kind of show this concept in action. So I want everyone, if you want, you can close your eyes. You don't have to if you don't want to. I've never closed my eyes in a live stream, so this feels a little weird. But I want you to
You have your hands
imagine.
on the wheel, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm still piloting the
Yeah, I'm gonna
USS
trust
Lodi
you.
over here.
I'm gonna trust you.
So I want you to imagine an apple. I want you to think of what color that apple is, and I want you to imagine that you're biting into this apple, and think of what you just see. So let me know in the comments. That's it. You can open up your eyes. Let me know in the comments what color was the apple that you saw, and then also, did you see anything inside? Larry, let's start with you. What color was that apple that you saw?
Well, I'm a child of like first grade, imagery from the '60s.
Yeah.
I just a red apple, and then you
Okay.
said bite into it,
Yes.
and it's funny. And then the minute you said we went on with this, my mind went to, oh damn, I wish I'd thought of something more original than red. And then when I bit into it, it was tart like a red apple, and I was like,
Huh.
a Granny Smith would have been so much sweeter.
You were disappointed by the apple you imagined.
You go to a red apple because of all the years you colored apples red, and when you were a
Sure.
kid. Anyway,
Sure.
so I got to have
Right.
my revenge on my subconscious by making it tart and thinking I would never do that again.
Nice. Okay, great. So you were thinking of a red one. I actually went grocery shopping yesterday, and I bought a bunch of red and green apples, the kind of mixed ones. So I was immediately thinking of that just because when I saw them yesterday, they looked so bright and fresh, and I got a bunch of those. But if we look at the comments section, Stress Free K said red. Libby says mine was a green apple. I saw some
I'm so
some
far
seeds.
behind on the chat. Oh my god, guys. Yeah.
The apple was slightly tart, Libby says. Victoria says red with yellow patches. It was white inside. Zahir says it was a red delicious apple because that's the variety I grew up with. Sweet tasting, a little brown inside. David says LOL, but my green Granny Smiths are tart. Scott says, strangely, my apple is green, even though I don't like green apples. So what we see, and then Tim says a multicolored apple. So what's going on here is we just activated your schema for apples. What a schema is, it's how your memories work. Your memories are much more about generalities that are combining all of the different life experiences you've had. When you think of an apple, you don't think of one exact specific apple usually. Although for me, I was thinking about the apple I saw yesterday. You're usually thinking of a combination of all the experiences you've had. We can do the same thing, and I can ask you to think about a dog. I could ask you to think about a CEO. I could ask you to think about a criminal, and your mind will activate all of these generalities based on all your life experience, all the media that you've been exposed to, all these different associations that are made. Larry, you were talking about, you immediately went back to like the childhood apples you saw, like coloring in, all of that kind of stuff. And that's how this stuff plays out. When we think about false assumptions, our minds approach people and situations the exact same way. They activate these schemas, these generalities that are not really based on any real experience. They're usually based upon generalities. So if you're thinking about Jean-Luc Picard in All Good Things, Riker and Troy. No, wait, no, Troy is not in. Troy died in that future.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Riker and Beverly, Geordi, even Data. Um, the way they're approaching that is by activating the generalities that they have about an older person. Same thing with Nog. Cisco, when he hears that Nog wants to enroll in Starfleet, all his generalities, the schemas that he has about Ferengi,
Of course,
that's what are
the little
activated.
bag of gold pressed latinum didn't help, but he
Right.
was working in his culture.
I forgot he brought in that little bag of latinum, right? That actually further activated all the generalities about Ferengi, money, profit, greed, all that sort of stuff. We can go through every example that we've talked about. The way our minds work is by activating these generalities. And we'll talk about how to cut through some of those generalities when we get to our away mission in a moment. But that's just one thing I wanted to mention is the same way we think of about objects and situations, it's the same way we approach people, and for better and worse. So we'll talk more about what to do about all of that in just a moment. But Larry, I actually want to dive into the K3
Ah,
factor. And while we're diving into K3 factor, I didn't finish my breakfast, so I'm gonna actually go full screen here and turn it over to you, Larry.
oh, well, here's a K3 you can eat too. Uh, well, I hope you do. You still have your finger on the button?
I'm here. I'm just trying
Okay.
to finish my yogurt.
Well, this was. Oh, you went widescreen on me here. Hello, see my doorknob right there? See my scanner, guys. Um, I could eat too. No, here's the thing. So I'm gonna go off screen. Well, we often go backstage and behind the scenes for the K3 factor, which, as many of you know, the K3 factor on McCoy's biobed was like the only reference to mental health in the original series, aside from psychotrack orders and Dr. Noel. Hell, speaking of Dagger of the Mind, um, K3 factor was here's our chance to dive deep and do a deep dive in my realm of things that we do in Trekland all the time. We have our deep divers in Portal 47 doing. In the theme of the week, in this theme of false assumptions, I'm going to completely leave the realm, not the realm of the TV shows, but the realm of the screen world and the folks backstage at the Hart Building and the Cooper Building at Paramount or wherever, and go to the world of publishing and talk about assumptions, because what's amazing to think about now, we watch these shows and we watch these characters have reveals. Of course we know what Nog becomes later on. Of course we saw, well, some of us saw Lorca up front, but some of the reveals that may feel like it's just a cheap plot device, and some of them that are really, really well done and they're really organic, I think, like Nog's is. But off screen, one of the things that's amazing now is to think of how well the classic books that we get into, like the technical manual of the original series, Bijo's Concordance, the medical reference, the Okuda's encyclopedias, a little tome you may have heard of called the Next Generation Companion. And in that same vein, there's a beloved book that not only was beloved among fans, but it was very helpful to the show writers, and it still is. Show writers, gamers, any kind of licensee loves it because it set the tone and organized things. But if you still got a finger on the button there, Ollie, can you put up the book that I sent you? There, bang. Mike and Rick's Next Generation Technical Manual. And a lot of you have it. I'm sure we'll have some chat comments here. This was my Next Generation companion was eventually slated to come out at the end of the 5th season of Next Generation, the blue cover. This book was supposed to be a year ahead of that, during the 4th season of Next Gen, after the big explosion in popularity of Best of Both Worlds. It was just delayed a little bit. But here's the thing. It wound up coming out just a couple months before my Next Generation companion toward the end of the 5th season, after the 5th season was finished. But both of those books were the first nonfiction official licensed books about the next generation, even as popular as it was, as Star Trek had always been and sold books on the basis of. Not just fiction, not just the novels, but the nonfiction books. And some of you were around this summer when I ran Nonfiction Fridays, the late, great little Corona time fill-in series that became much more than that, and we're going to bring it back at some point later on. So some of you, we talked about these themes. You may have heard me tell this story. The assumption, the false assumption here was that everybody at Pocketbooks, at Simon & Schuster, thought that these things were completely niche items. And when they came to publishing the tech manual in a year, with a year delay, which meant a year further into the ratings boom of Next Generation, you'll love this. The false assumption was that they had no idea how popular this would be, and the initial print run of the tech manual was 5,000 copies.
5,000 copies? That's not enough for like a few conventions.
Well, yeah. And when those were, but of course, publishing, those are through distributors that go to like the chain bookstores, much less the little ones. And so when it was publicized, and it's not like today. Today, the whole thing is pre-order on Amazon, right, or whatever, Barnes and Noble. Everybody you announce the book 6 months early, and everybody orders right then and puts their money into it right then. That wasn't. We're still brick and mortar, but still the stores had to pre-order a lot. Well, the run was gone in 2 days. I mean, it came out. They went to stores. Lucky ones walked down and got one right then. But so they put another order in for, I think, 5,000 again, which was,
oh my gosh, come on, folks.
And then I think they put an order in for 10,000, which was immediately gone. And basically, it was one of these cases where they just kept nickel and diming it until finally somebody went, "Will you just like print 500,000 copies or whatever it wound up being?
Yeah.
Would you just print the damn book?" But it took 3 or 4 cycles. And of course, we're talking about money and about not making profit. But you would think between the success of the original series nonfiction books, the fact that these were the first, after 4 years, after 5 years, these are the first official licensed books from show creators that were coming down the pike. You would think there'd be a little more faith of the heart in these titles. There'd been a lot of fan knockoffs. Not that people were trying to make money doing this, but people were doing
stuff. Filling a need.
People just wanted the stuff. It's like, shut up and take my money. It's like fan films. It's like fanzine. It's like anything that when there's it's like, well, you're the license holder, but I'm sorry if you're too stupid to make money on this. I just want it for the content. But yes, eventually they got over that. But there's your K3. There's your false assumptions from another aspect.
I did not know that at all, Larry. And I have my copy right here. I pulled it out as I was also finishing up my yogurt. I'm trying to figure out here what printing I have. I'm gonna have to follow up with you afterwards to figure out how to figure that out, because I'm quite curious now. I picked this up
at a comment in the posts on the page. That's the comment symbol. Yeah.
All it says is it has the date of the first printing. It says first pocketbook trade paperback printing November 1991, but it doesn't tell me what printing this is. Maybe there's some way I can figure out from the ISBN number. I don't know. I picked this up at my very first Star Trek convention, and you've got your copy looks a lot better than mine. Mine, I devoured this. Yes, Scott, that's a very loved copy. Yes, it is. I picked this up, and I must have been 5th grade or something.
Do you see the little row of numbers under that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's your printing. See, mine's 11.
Yours 11? The first number there?
My first edition is signed by Mike and Rick over there on the shelf.
So that first number is the printing. Mine is 20.
The lowest number is what printing it was. Yes.
Okay. The lowest number or the first number?
Well, the lowest number. Because
the lowest number. Oh, mine says 10 then.
Okay, then you have a 10th printing. Yeah.
Wow. I love this. I love this book. I spent that whole summer after I got this reading every page, just devouring it. Because what I love, for anyone who's not familiar with this, my favorite thing about the tech
Well, I
manual
plunged us down a
is
rabbit hole, didn't I?
yes, you did. Um, Up top, it explains everything. So here we have isolinear chips. So up top, it explains everything in canon, and on the bottom is
Yeah.
like the reality.
Is
And
there conceit to yeah.
yeah, and it's like production information and real scientific problems with this. My favorite bit is the Heisenberg compensator, and then the explanation that like people like always call Michael Okuda and ask like, so how does the Heisenberg compensator work? And their response is like, it doesn't. I mean, we don't know. We just named it the thing because we know there's this problem that makes transportation kind of impossible. So if anyone hasn't picked it up, is it still possible to pick up,
Oh
Larry?
yeah,
I think.
it's not. Well, I think it. You know what? I think I saw Mike say the other day that it may still actually be in print, like
Yeah.
not just there's a million on eBay or Amazon, but I think it's actually maybe still being.
I think the quality, people have complained about the quality of the new printings. Like they're not as like, this has been with me since '91.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really worth getting. I think I mentioned this in previous life support episode, Larry. I don't have the DS9 tech manual. Is it at the same caliber as the TNG
Yes.
tech manual?
Well, it is. It's different because years later. Whoops. Sorry, guys.
I heard it's in color.
Sir, yes, it's in color.
Okay, you're too high.
I am. I'm too.
You've
There we go.
separated the saucer section. It's all tricky now. um, Tim says he's pulled his copy, and it's the 1991 printed copy. So, Tim, you're in good company here. Um, oh, it's a beauty. Oh, it looks beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it looks like just an evolution, and so it has Cardassian technology and Federation technology.
They get through the station, they get to the Defiant, and then they have
Ooh.
a rundown of all. It's a catch-all. They try to catch a lot of Voyager and DS9. It's not specifically about. There's a knockoff, but all the major alien ships that are seen that are known about. And there's some retconning, but there's some major discrepancies. And Rick Sternbach worked on it too, along with Doug Drexler. But there's first guesses on a lot of the ships that weren't, the specs, measurements, and things, and they had to be retconned a little bit later and other things. But no, it's a great guide to DS9 and the Defiant in depth.
Oh, very
and
cool.
There's some foldouts for the all 4 decks of the Defiant have a foldout, so you get a little blueprinty feeling too.
Michelle says I have a 1991 printed copy. Also, it looks like that was a good year. A lot of us in 1991 were getting copies. Hugo says I think the original response to how do the Heisenberg compensators work is they work very well. Thank you.
Well, Mike tells the story about Patrick, now Sir Patrick, came up to the art department one time and said, now early on, like first season, said, now tell me exactly how the warp drive works. And so they went through all the explanations, and he went, How about if we just stick with this? The warp drive works because I do this and say engage. And they were like, yes, perfect. We'll go with that. Yeah.
I love it. You can say that when you're the captain.
Yeah.
So that was Larry, we gosh, there's so much love for this document. I think for so many of us, it just we could spend hours. We could spend hours talking about this, and I think Scott has a lot of nostalgic love for the Nonfiction Fridays. He says, "Oh, it's like a mini Nonfiction Friday." You covered this on your Nonfiction Fridays.
Yeah,
so
we did. Yes, we had a week. Yeah, and Rick Stormbach came in and was a guest talker. We had
Oh
4 or
my
5
gosh.
guest speakers. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's jump into the away missions. I've got a quick one for folks. So, when it comes to the problem with the way our minds work and thinking about these generalities is they don't quite do this for people we know well and have been in contact with well, because your schema for people you know is much more complicated than people you don't know. There's a lot more detail there and all that sort of stuff. But this problem of thinking in generalities, it most impacts us when we come across people we don't know well, or they're saying things that we haven't talked about too much that might be activating a whole host of biases and assumptions that we have. So, I've got a simple approach that's very hard to do. But if you're finding yourself struggling with big assumptions you have with friends, with family, with coworkers, maybe you're coming across comments they're making on social media which are really activating you and activating these assumptions that you might be struggling with. A few things. If you want to overcome some of these assumptions, number one is having a conversation offline. So that means not tweeting back and forth. That means not having a comment war on Facebook. It means picking up the phone and talking to them, or talking to them in person. That's hard to do nowadays. So maybe a Zoom, one-on-one, FaceTime, Google Meet kind of thing. So number one is like taking it offline and actually having a conversation where you can hear the other person and hopefully see some of their facial expression. A lot of data is lost online because we don't have face-to-face eye contact, we don't have tone,
Right.
all that sort of stuff. Number two, and this is what makes it really hard, the goal has to be listening to understand as opposed to listening to win an argument. And this is why this is an approach that is really only going to help you with people you care about, as opposed to some random person on the internet that you're having a fight with. But if we take it very simply and we say, like Larry, we talked a number of weeks ago about problems in fandom and some of the anger we have about new Star Trek versus old Star Trek. And this is something that's been going on since The Next Generation came out. If you want to really understand why one person might really love the Kelvin timeline films, or might love Star Trek Discovery, or Picard, or Enterprise, and that's not where your head is at,
Or not.
having that, or not, yeah, right. Having that conversation with the goal of trying to understand and not dispute. It's so easy to fall into, well, Picard's obviously the best captain, or Enterprise is obviously stupid because of this. But listening to understand, you got to go in with that mindset. Otherwise, this process is not gonna unfold well. You're gonna be still stuck with the assumptions you have. And the last thing is you're having this either phone call or face-to-face conversation. You have this goal of trying to understand, and then the tool you use is something called active listening. I've got a whole video on the Psych Show about how to listen like a therapist, and it walks you through this whole process. It's a process where you're trying to listen and reflect back what the other person is saying in your own words, and that's really how you
I'm
get...
trying to listen and then reflect back to the person in my own words.
Yes, just like you mentioned right now, Larry. Well done, my friend. It's a very different way of listening, but it's something that's going to cut through a lot of these assumptions. And the other thing, if you're on the other side and you want to really help the other person to understand where you're coming from, it's about storytelling. It's about telling the story of how you came to love this thing, or how you came to have these views. We see that with Nog and Cisco. We see that with a lot of the moments we've talked about when Geordi explains his experience and what his life is like with his visor. It's through storytelling that we're able to cut through a lot of these assumptions. So take those conversations offline, have the goal of trying to understand, not dispute. um, active listening, watch my video on how to listen like a therapist, and maybe someone can share the link to that in the comment section. And then the last thing is telling your story. That's how we cut through some of these assumptions. It's hard, Larry, and this is why it's so easy to fall into these.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into these assumption traps when we're just engaging with each other on social media. And when we're also engaging with people we don't even know, what motivation is there to even try to understand where these people are coming from? So, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to do all that sort of stuff.
I'm sorry, I was catching up chat. I feel like I'm way behind. Ever since I've had to go to pad, it's hard to keep up on the chat. Hopefully this is the
Well,
last.
what you need to do is you need to approach it as Captain Picard does, and just have about 50 pads just on your desk. I think that's gonna
I
help
want
you
the
out.
big giant movie budget pads. That's what I
Oh
want.
yeah, they had really big ones in the movies compared to the show.
That's how you get, and they're gold. Lots of gold trim on those movie pads.
So in the we'd love to hear from you in the comments about how
Yeah.
you've been dealing with some assumptions, or maybe times where you realize your assumptions were way off. We'd love to hear about that as we open up these hailing frequencies and just kind of have an open conversation about these
Everybody.
topics. You know, the thing,
And
Larry.
if you want to come on, if you want our Skype
Yes.
there, if you want to come on camera with us, text in on that Skype.
Yeah.
This is the time to do it.
You know, Larry, my job for so long was working as a therapist and really understanding the stories of people I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a very long time ago that my assumptions were always wrong. They were always wrong. I would get a phone call conversation with someone before they come in for their initial assessment. And they might say, yeah, I'm struggling with social anxiety, I've been experiencing depression, and I've also struggling with substance use, right? Here's my background, here's where I'm from. We have a 10, 15-minute conversation. And then they come in, and when I actually understand their story from like birth to where they are now, it's never what I expected. Never. I have worked with people who are incarcerated. I've worked with people who are young, who are old. I've worked with people who, when you read the description of what they're struggling with, you might think, oh, wow, I clearly have an idea of where this came from. I'm always wrong. Always, always wrong. And through that work, I've realized that there is so much more complexity to who people are.
Oh, no.
Well, there's so much more complexity to why people do the things they do, why they believe the things that they believe, than we ever give people credit for.
Well, and the ability to self-storytell in a distant way. I mean, to be accurate, whether it's to hide or it's to paper over for their own sanity, or they just missed it.
Right.
It's an outside observer.
And we so rarely get to understand that experience from other people, especially if we're just having, random conversations or just fleeting conversations with other people. Glenn says, I love the idea of active listening for the purpose of understanding, but there's also the bratty part of my personality that sometimes likes to argue for fun without any anger and animosity behind it. Yeah, Glenn, I will totally argue with anyone about Star Trek Into Darkness. I think the thing there is, do both people have the same goal in mind?
You two do not argue for reasons. You merely argue.
Well, I mean, so that's the thing, right, Larry? If you and I walk into a situation where we're having fun and we both want to have that debate, then that's great. But I think the problem, Glenn, and this is something, Larry, I'm guessing you probably agree with too, is when those goals are misaligned, and if someone is saying, you don't understand, this movie means it, changed my life in this way, and here you are saying it's stupid. That's a fundamental misalignment. One person might want to argue about... from a film criticism or a fan criticism way, while the other person is really talking about meaning, purpose, beliefs, values, parts of their identity. That's just a completely different goals in that
Different
conversation.
changes, different paradigms. Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
then when the problem with social media, I've said this so much. Social media, I may have said it here once before, but as with reflection, the way things have gone the last 5, 6, 7 years, and the way that social media is able to be manipulated, it's totally exposed the flaws. The same way I think the way it took years to figure out what the coming of the atom bomb meant for people. It went from being, oh,
Mm,
super weapon that saved us and ended a war soon, to all the ramifications of it. But it took a while for that to filter through society. I feel like that's what social media is doing. What you just said, we all kind of get it, that when we were just limited to who we saw face to face, the people we knew, we wouldn't
yeah.
be calling or writing letters or whatever, or even email to people we didn't, to people unless we knew them, unless
Right.
it was a very specific
Right.
thing. And then we were on, if it was a query letter to sell something to a person, or if it was an introductory letter, we had a special face on. We had a special wall of protective armor and also
Yeah.
an approachable factor that we're doing, because we all knew we didn't know that person and they didn't know us. But
Right.
social media has just like amped that up. It's like catapulted us forward with this technology that we didn't have the social maturity to know all the ramifications. It was brand new and it was cool and neat, but we didn't know that that thing we unwrapped under the Christmas tree shiny had lead paint and leaky batteries. A year later, oh, look what happened. I mean, but we're so addicted because it's so immediate. And
Right.
you're
Right.
getting information, you're meeting people that you don't have to. None of us had filters of protection for introductions, for realizing the shiny person we met. It's like going on a blind date and realizing a week later that, oh my god, I'm going out with a psycho that was smiling the first date. I mean, it's all those bad metaphors, to the point where we're sucked in before we even realize it, and we're complaining about all this going on. Well, when it was just a circle of our friends, and we had that guy, we had Fred in our circle, and he was always the beginner. He was always the whiner, but we knew him and we all loved Fred, so we put
Yeah.
up with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
whining. But when you multiply that by a million and it's people all over the world, it's just depressing. Or I just wasted an hour arguing with somebody, and then I find out they're a troll and they've got two friends.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they just
And
left 10 of their posts with me out of their 400. So
I completely agree, Larry.
we
We're not wired.
to assimilate a defensive. We're not all savvy about how we use social media to be able to weed that potential out yet, or we're
We're
just
we're
now.
not. We are not wired to have conversations with people that are completely out of our network in the way social media allows. Like we're able to have conversations with people who are coming from vastly different backgrounds and have different ways of speaking and different beliefs and different attitudes and different norms. That's and without any of the stuff that humanizes the face-to-face contact. The face-to-face contact will always put on a little bit more of the brakes and of inhumanity. And if you don't have that, it's a lot easier for conversations to go way out of control. Libby says an important point here. I love to learn about alternate understandings. However, I've been berated, screamed at, damned to hell, and had to listen to racism and homophobia. That's when I walk away from my own sanity. And this is where I would say, like, everything I described, that approach, it's very hard to do, and you have to be very strategic about it. I think that approach is more important when it's people that you either really care about, like people in your family,
Mm-hmm.
people you're stuck having to interact with, like coworkers and people in your immediate community. But it's not necessarily for the random person on the internet that you're coming across, or it's not necessarily for someone who's an old friend from 20 years ago that you're now connected on Facebook but you haven't talked to in decades. It's you have to be very careful about. You have to protect yourself. You have to take care of your own mental health and go into these situations when both people really want to have that conversation. When you're motivated to really work through the conflicts in the relationship. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to do these things.
I'm sorry. Well, I'll think about it. Yes, you sparked something in me that's not gotten away, but uh, yeah, I'm just trying to. I feel very guilty that I've let so much of the chat go by this week because I know people are bubbling over.
Well, I want to mention Victoria here says, when I get angry, I've learned not to act on it because it's caused by false assumption. It's
That's
hard though. That
that's
was what
what.
you wanted to.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
go for it. What did you want to say?
I don't know. The theme of assumptions is what I should have been. I came away of all the technical specific knowledge and experience that I picked up in grad school.
Yeah.
Um, it was an MA program in theater, but the intro to grad studies, the generic, which was for theater people, this class. But the number one bottom line thing, the way it was crystallized was assumptions, and that we are just like we're talking here, but this was even more global. Basically, whenever we get into an uncomfortable situation or a miscommunication, or if we're in a stuck place, the basic bottom line was back up and back up and back up and look at our own assumptions. And it's the unexamined assumptions that we just carry, that we don't even think about.
Yes.
Because they all seem like part of the reality bank. But as we get out into the world, and the more diverse people, the more diverse backgrounds, generations, ways of doing things, the more you get out of your little cocoon of home, the more those assumptions are going to be challenged. And it's not that other people are wrong or that you're wrong. It's just, but it's a healthy thing if you could take that, like what we've said here generically, if you get in a situation where there's a conflict or a disagreement, or you're just stuck with someone, you're at a brick wall, back up and look at your own assumptions. And that's something I've tried to do over the years, but especially here in the fallow times, and now in the start back times of Star Trek. It's and people, I think it was that way anyway, because the internet just does that. And the first time I ever saw the internet was people showing me message boards with FidoNet. I didn't have a modem, but back in the old 1200 baud modem dial-up days, and you did message boards, and there's flame wars going on message boards in the 90s, and people don't care about facts, they just rather go back and forth. But
alt.startrek. Blah blah blah. Right.
Yeah, I just remember FidoNet was one of the but that thing that I learned very quickly, that some people just get off on the conflict. They don't care about the actual facts, what they're arguing about. Some people are really the worst case of Tellarites, but it helps me out. It helps me out to understand other people. And it's not about them, it's about you, but it's not so much that you're wrong. It's just, what is the unexamined assumption you brought to this that needs to be dragged out in the light of day and examined?
Yes.
An unexamined assumption. And right now, social media, as we were just talking about, social media has just amped all that up on steroids times 1,000. We're meeting new people all the time that we don't know where they came from.
Yes.
And thrown into conversations, and we're thrown into this. And even the people that we know, maybe we've known them for 5 years or 10 years. And maybe we didn't just meet them. Maybe it's a fan friend of ours.
Yes.
Or it's somebody we've known from a different walk of life, and we're talking in that realm. Or maybe we're still in fandom in Trek, but we've known them from somewhere else, and we thought we knew them from that life, and we thought they were reasonable. And but everybody brings their own history, their own baggage, their own ways of looking at things, good, bad, crisis, privilege, lack of privilege, crisis, lack of crisis, comfortable life, horrible upbringing, whatever they bring to things. And sometimes it takes more than 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 layers of being around them. It's like you never know anybody till you live with them. Roommates is the first wave, and then being married is the second wave, and maybe even being married more than once. But yeah, going back and looking at that. So one of the things I do when I'm negotiating with threads or somebody in politics, especially, politics is the most heated. And not that I want to get into politics, but one strategy that I've tried to find is a lot of times that assumption is people only assume what they know. They assume what you're going to say before you even say it.
Sure.
And what I like to do to disrupt that is to come in on a third angle that they're not expecting, because I know it's not what they've been taught to think. And it's a totally different way of reminding us that we might or we absolutely do have something else that unites us that we have in common, to kind of disrupt that script of conflict. Now, that's heightened because it's politics and it feels more life and death than our little Star Trek world. But you can adapt. Sorry if I took over the thing, but you can disrupt this script and we have it now. Oh, you like Discovery? Oh, you like the original series and you don't like the new. Wherever people might be entrenched in, if they're stuck in those ruts, rather than coming in like a bulldozer, come in like the little kid walking in from the side door, going, "Hi, does anybody like Vulcan cookies?" I mean, I don't know, but find a third angle to fly in at that disrupts what everybody assumes the entire conversation is going to be, and assumes what everybody's background is. And if you can find that way of unhinging the thing that throws everybody and makes them, whether they're conscious of it or not, makes them realize that there's something besides this entrenched way. Anyway, I've just found out that because it throws people, and you don't do it in a threatening way. The best thing is to do it in a completely neutral way where their instinct tells them you're not being. Like, they can't find what's your ulterior motive here, what's your secret plot, what's your Trojan horse. Well, there is no Trojan horse because we're talking about dandelions, not horses and Trojans or whatever.
I have a question that I always like to, if they're on the other end, where if they're on the other end and they just really feel like that someone is not understanding or listening to them, I have a question that I always recommend, which is to say, why do you think this is so important to me? Why do you think?
Why do you think it's so important to me?
Yes, and it kind of forces a little bit of empathy. So again, let's stay in the Star Trek example, although this could apply to politics and religion, all that sort of, all the very difficult things, relationships. Yeah. If someone is attacking me for my stance on the Kelvin timeline films, and they're just, berating me, I can just kind of pause and say, well, let's just stop for a moment. Why do you think these films are so important to me? And they might have their perspective. And then I would say, this would be the honest truth, is it was so meaningful to me to see Star Trek films be so a part of pop culture, to see the billboards everywhere, and to see non-fans talking about Star Trek, and to see non-fans going to see Star Trek films. Because so for me, growing up in the 80s and 90s as a Star Trek fan, well, I became a Star Trek fan in the early 90s, like a year before I got this book.
Right.
But for me, I never really felt like it was something in the 90s that I could easily talk about. And the Kelvin timeline films made it easy for me to talk about Star Trek. Not just those films, but like everything that came before. And that's what the Kelvin timeline films mean to me, is me seeing Star Trek 2009 with a wide group. I saw it 5 times in the theater, and I saw each time was with very different people. The first time was with my big Star Trek friends, and then each time after that was with a different group of people who I never thought I would see a Star Trek film by. Like, that's why it matters so much to me. And that's also the kind of stuff that's so left out of these conversations. Mm-hmm. So that's also something that, Larry, it's not going to happen over social media easily. So all this stuff is really hard. Scott brings up another way of thinking about false assumptions that I didn't really. Social media
distills things down to where, to a certain point, it's pointless to try to do anything to that degree.
Yes, absolutely. Scott mentions, in general, I've always had a hard time managing assumptions and expectations. It's a balance between wanting to be optimistic and positive versus trying not to expect too much and then often being disappointed. This, Larry, we didn't think about this, but false assumptions related to the future. We've been thinking a lot about people, but there's a lot of assumptions that people have had about where the future is going. Like this
Where's
week,
my
I was trying.
cars, Ali?
Yeah, I know.
Where's my
Well,
car?
like this week, Larry, I was trying to clear out my inbox. It was massively full because during the March, April, May timeframe when shelter in place was at its height, I just kind of gave up on email. And I went back to look at some of those messages, and it was actually quite hard to read some of those messages. A lot of them were, well, let's table this for now, but let's revisit it in a few weeks when things get back to normal.
Right.
They never got back to normal. We're still here, like months later, struggling with a lot of the similar things. At least in the United States, we are, and false assumptions about the future and where things are going. It's so no one can predict the future, and no one can predict how we're going to feel in the future either. That's an aspect of this that we haven't really talked about, and that gets to. I think we had an episode about uncertainty. Did we've done an episode about
Yeah.
So it gets back to a lot of those techniques that we talked about in that episode about how do you manage yourself when there's so much uncertainty about the future.
Yeah, well, that's true. The whole thing of the whole situation of the coronavirus and COVID-19 was okay. It's March. If we just buckle down for 3 months, but there were a lot of us. I was saying, guys, it's not the same disease, but the Spanish flu had 3 waves because people thought it was done.
Yeah.
And if they were even on the same page in the beginning, if they were, then they let up too soon. And this will be a year and a half, and that's what it's turning into be. It could have been probably handled better. Well, I know it could have been handled better. But, it was not going to be done. We knew back then it wasn't going to be. It was just going to be. I was more concerned about the public at large's psyche dealing with it than I was about the virus. It's like I knew what I was going to do. Now, unless I was starving because I'd been kicked out of my if the world caved in around us because no one wanted to believe this and nothing cooperated. But that's not what happened. A lot of segments of life and society cooperated at the beginning. It's just they want it done. Our ADD, 24/7 mass media culture, I want it done in 3 months.
Yeah.
I don't have time for a 1.5-year pandemic. Well, then you're going to have a 1.5-year pandemic.
I was waiting when this would come up, but Michelle brought it up. Don't assume it makes an ass out of you and me. To which Gled responded, the first time someone said that to me, I responded with, I never assume, I surmise. Very
that makes a sir out of me and say.
And Libby says over here, one of the things I was bullied about in high school was being a Star Trek fan. However, that's what the nice people from my class remember for with fondness. And yeah, Libby, we could talk about that a lot. Like I was very, I kept my love of Star Trek guarded. I did not publicly share it in middle school and high school. And there were a few people in my Star Trek class. There were a few people in my class who loved. I did not attend Starfleet Academy. There were a few people in my school who were much open about their love of Star Trek, and I never really became friends with them because I was too scared to approach them for fear of being bullied. So that's one of my big regrets is I never became friends with those people. I wish I did. Funny thing, Libby, I'll share another story. My best friend, we met each other in 4th grade. His name's Lowen. He and I were best friends, and we didn't realize until senior year of high school that we were both big-time Star Trek fans. The only way we figured this out is I was hanging out at his home, and in his room, there was a Star Trek puzzle buried way up in the closet. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, what's that? And he started blushing and was like, I think that's my parents. I don't know what it is. And I said, oh, that's cool. Well, I'm into Star Trek, like The Next Generation. I'm a huge fan. And he's like, oh, really? Like, what episodes? And then it was like very clear that he was a big fan. And so we caught, it was the first time I watched Star Trek with anyone outside of my family. We watched the finale of Star Trek Voyager together. It aired as we were graduating high school. And we watched that together. And now we can't stop talking Trek. And he's in my Star Trek Adventures group. We played together. So, yeah, it's...
Those mutual coming out of the closet stories are so touching.
Quite literally, he had put his Star Trek in his closet.
Yeah.
But, you know, it gets back to assumptions. I made a very strong assumption that he was not a fan, and I decided at that point that I was always going to be open about my fandom because it might make it easier for other people to share. And in college, we had these Star Trek viewing parties in my dorm room because I was so open about it, and we discovered that there's so many people on our floor who also love Star Trek. So you never know.
Well, when I went to college my sophomore year, I figured out the system and I started a Star Trek club, and I made it an official campus thing and found a sponsor and did all the paperwork and all that, and had I put flyers up and two organized. That's what we used to do, kids, before you made a Facebook event page. We put flyers up everywhere, and I found out that we had suite mates. We had like two and two with sharing a bathroom, and then down the hall, the next suite mates down, guy came. We literally were talking on the way out. He was an artist, and he was showing me his artwork that he had stuck in his notebook binder, a clear pocket on the front. And we kept walking and walking and walking, and finally we realized we were going in the same direction and talking, and we realized we were in the same dorm, in the same wing, like down next door neighbors, suite mates. We were like,
wow,
it's amazing. And that's my friend Kevin, who's been like, we were each other's best man, and he's in Phoenix now and all that. But he did a lot of my logos, like the Portal 47 and the MyStar and all that. But anyway, but yeah, it's amazing when that kind of thing happens. And
I love Cairo's comment here. I think it kind of brings it all full circle. Cairo47 on Twitch says, I had a false assumption when I went to my first Star Trek convention. I thought the vast majority of people would be white young men, like in the open source software circles I was in, and I found out Trekkies are really diverse, which was a positive surprise to me. I love the experience of going to conventions because you do meet the diversity of the fandom. When it comes to age, when it comes to cultural background, beliefs, careers, there are so many ways in which to be a Star Trek fan, and you never really see the whole diversity, the IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations of the fandom until you're at a convention. And that was something that I think many of us had mixed experiences with the documentary Trekkies, and something I liked about Trekkies 2. Trekkies 2 showed a bit more of the diversity, also went more global, but Trekkies 1 really showed a very narrow perspective on what it means to be a fan. The one thing I liked about Trekkies 1 was James Doohan's story of a fan who was suicidal in Star Trek and conventions, and seeing him really saved her life. I love that story. But yeah, it gave a narrow perspective, didn't it, Larry?
I feel guilty that I'm not in the chat more, but Trekkies. So, Denise was a host, Roger Nygaard, who I got to know later on, but the three producers, they did like a focus group right after we moved to LA. They'd worked on that 2 or 3 years, collecting all those interviews, right? And it was still a new thing. Ooh, a documentary about Star Trek. And they did a rough cut showing for, 25, 30 people who were from the Star Trek community, either professionals or professional adjacents or some big name fans from the LA area. We just right down the street from Paramount. They did a showing in a room. They screened it, and it was longer. It got cut down some more. But the whole pitch was, we want to show the great diversity of Star Trek and fandom and show why it's important to people. And we want to show some wacky fans. We want to show some really like celebrity fans too that give it a legitimacy and all that. And that's what's and we were like, okay. And we watched, and to a person, this like is the most hostile focus group I'd ever been. These 25 or 30 people in Los Angeles, some of whom were like either big time fans or worked in the industry or they worked in the Star Trek world to some degree. Uh, people were like, you just had like 15 crazies. Like, where is the equality? Where's the you had Jimmy? Yeah, aside from the known Star Trek people like Jimmy Doohan and Marina and stuff, like there was one guy who was they had Buzz Aldrin. It's like, where are the celebrities you promised? Like, you had Buzz Aldrin, a few Star Trek actors, and 47 crazy people. And people were like, you cannot go out and say this represents all Star Trek. And basically, they were all saying, we're about to go out and trash this if you try to say this is looking at all aspects of Star Trek fandom. But they were like, oh, they had no idea. Or maybe they did.
Wow. Talk about false assumptions.
Yes, and I'm just glad to say that the final version is still there. It's like, well, you got Neil Armstrong, you got Buzz Aldrin, and Star Trek actors, and all those other people. It's like they didn't get enough of the, of the weight going on there. They didn't find politicians, and ambassadors, and scientists, and culturists, and authors. They didn't.
And Larry, we're very
more balanced and global.
We're very lucky. We're very fortunate to live in this era where what it means to be a Star Trek fan is it doesn't evoke quite all that imagery. I mean, when we have a former president of the United States, President Obama, who has talked about how much he's a fan and what Star Trek means to him. It's a different world we live in now. I'm going to share one more story that's related to something Scott just mentioned. Scott said, TNG premiered in the fall of my high school freshman year. The next morning, while discussing Gilgamesh in my English class, the teacher stated that one of the themes of the book was no one lives forever. He then added, unless you're the 137-year-old Admiral McCoy on Star Trek, and I thought I was the only one who had watched it. Scott, I have a similar story for you. My freshman year of college, I was taking an English class, and my English professor was talking. He was really rough, gruff. Had looked like this guy has seen some stuff. Very much older, and great professor. Really just like helped us understand so much about literature. I love this person, but I was always kind of scared and on guard with this person. And I had class with him the day after Star Trek Enterprise premiered, and he was going on and on about something about grammar the next day. And then he said, and it's like splitting the infinitive. You're not supposed to do it, but like everyone does it. But in the new Star Trek, apparently they're not splitting the infinitive. It's to go boldly. And he said that, and I just kind of stopped. I'm like, he watches Star Trek Enterprise? Like, I mean, there's only one episode that had come out, but he was clearly a fan. And I would have never thought he's a fan because he just did not seem to fit the schema, the mold that I had for what a fan is. And time again, I've been reminded of how wrong I am with my assumptions of
That's
other people.
That's the pleasant side of having false assumptions.
Yes.
When you're pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
So, Larry, it's that time of the show where I am going to have to play, as Libby likes to say, the sad music. Libby likes to call it the sad music at the end and the happy music in the beginning,
I've noticed that. Yeah.
So before I start playing the sad music here, where can people find more of you this week, Larry?
Well, more of me this week and every week. LarryNemecek.com is where everything Trekland is. It's portal. You get to portal47.net there. Tuesdays, 1 o'clock, we do have Trekland Tuesdays live with a theme every week. Last week I did an Ask Me Anything, and it went crazy.
Oh, wow.
Wherever you're watching right now, if you're on Facebook, you can find me on Facebook there, Larry Nemecek's Trekland. That's also an Instagram account. And if you're on YouTube right now, please subscribe while you're here. Please subscribe after you go there. because I got a late start with the channel. But that's by Twitter, just at Larry Nemecek. And yeah, 1 o'clock Pacific. So 4 o'clock Eastern on Tuesdays. And every Tuesday we have the Trek Files come from Roddenberry podcast that you can get on Facebook too. There's groups for all these on Facebook, and please come over and join our Facebook group here. Coming up down the line, October 28th, just mark the calendar. I don't have the infrastructure set up yet, but our 5th anniversary, every year on the anniversary of Portal 47's founding, I have a big public open house guest. Everybody's welcome to come in. Just, grab a virtual ticket. I don't have it up yet, but I want everybody to know that it'll be Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, Wednesday, October 28th. So we'll be nailing down the guest. We're in the middle of that right now, but just put that on your calendars if you can. And we'll see you around Trekland, guys. Ollie, how about you?
Yeah. I'm always excited to continue talking with our community on our Facebook channel or Facebook group, which is Life Support Live. We run our polls there. We post our funny caption of the week highlights. So please join us over there. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. This week on YouTube, episode 2 of PBS's Self-Evident comes out. We're talking about activism and what it means to be an activist and challenging some assumptions there. That comes out on Monday, so check out PBS Voices for that. And I'm always on The Psych Show on YouTube. And yeah, Larry, we have no idea what we're going to be talking about next week, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be helpful.
We've hitched our wagon to a lower deck star here, at least in this way. Yes.
And until then, folks, we encourage you to live long and prosper.
Yes, everybody, trek well.